Matt, what inspired you to get into music in the first place? Where did this passion start?
Well, I think it started when I was at, I can't remember where it was, but I saw like a stall advertising guitars and guitar lessons. And I thought that electric guitars looks pretty cool. So um, I started doing guitar lessons and I discovered a lot of rock music, especially from my guitar teacher back in primary school. And also, my dad used to play a lot of old rock like AC/DC and even some metal like Rammstein. Well, I didn't know that was metal yet, but uh, yeah, that's sort of early what got me into it. But really, it was through playing the guitar. Wasn't like I got inspired to play the guitar through music as much as it just looking cool. And then through that, it pulled me into music and I discovered uh, everything and got obsessed with it. Yeah.
Same thing with me and the piano. It looked appealing, so I just went for it. Um,
Yeah.
um, how was the band formed? How was Freedom of Fear formed?
Well, I mean, it goes back pretty far for me where it wasn't officially named yet, but a few of the songs that are on the first EP I
Mhm.
wrote in high school, and
Oh,
a couple of
wow.
them even played at concerts. Yeah, so that's going back to like 2013 kind of thing. But
Hmm.
then I think it was maybe 6 months or a year after I finished high school that I actually got a lineup together, including a couple of guys that were from my school, to
Hmm.
make that first EP of Ashes. Um, so yeah, it really came from that, and like all the songs I wrote either in high school or uni, and then I got this lineup together and we made that first EP. So the only original member that's left from that lineup is our current bass player Georgina and myself,
Oh,
obviously. So that's where it all started. Yeah.
mm. That is quite bold to do most of those numbers at talent shows because I riffed through the Kingdom of Ashes EP, and that's quite a lot of it's quite a lot to take in, which is a good thing. I affectionately refer to it as a zombie musical in a
Yeah, well,
sense.
I think back in high school we didn't have the full death metal vocals yet as well because I was actually doing vocals then, and it was more like what do you call like thrash metal, like Metallica style vocals, and or there was
Hmm.
just instrumentals. So sometimes we played them like that, and I realized that maybe I wasn't, perhaps with a lot of practice I could have got there, but it wasn't necessarily a talent of mine to do metal vocals. So eventually, I sought out vocalists to do that. But I think that made it a bit less scary at school concerts for people.
Mm, absolutely. It's really tricky to come up with band names. How did you guys settle on yours?
It was actually our first vocalist, Jasper, who came up with that name, I believe. And I can't remember where he got it from, but we were just cycling through a bunch of options, and that seemed like the best one at the time. So we went with it. And he actually left the band before we played any live shows because he moved to Melbourne.
Oh,
But yeah, that's where the name came from.
yeah, now is where I am. Um, for any new fans who might be interacting with this interview for the first time, what are the hallmarks of the Freedom of Fear project? Like, if they're getting into this stuff for the first time, what can they expect?
If I go by the sound that we've had from our last album, Carpathia, that's
Mhm.
where I feel like we've really uh, established our sounds properly. It took a while. Obviously, the first EP is very old now. So if I go by the newer stuff, it's essentially it's a combination of the heaviness and brutality of death metal with melody and uh, like harmony and chord progressions that are influenced by classical music and just you know melodic stuff in general, with lots of like fast guitar solos and technical things thrown in, as well as atmosphere. So we try to combine a lot of those sort of elements into a cohesive sound, or at least that's just how it's developed from trying to combine music tastes into a sound that is its own thing. I mean, I think that so it's hard to say concisely what I'd say, but
Mm.
yeah, that's my best answer, I reckon.
Yeah, absolutely. It sums it up pretty well. Um, you've mentioned that the construction of it, there's classical instrumentals. I noticed the sort of church-like sounds that are in the dark gothic church choir sounds in the Carpathia album. So I definitely noticed that there. How do you guys tackle the songwriting process? What does an average like sit down together look like to pen things down?
Well, there isn't really any sitting down together. So basically, all of the music, except for two songs that's out so far anyway, there was two songs on Carpathia that Corey, the other guitarist, wrote. Everything else I wrote at home. And then um, usually either recorded in demo form or in the past I used to tab it into a guitar tab program straight away. And then once things were sort of ready to go, we'd bring it to the rehearsal room and maybe tweak it a little bit. But generally, especially after having the experience of doing it for a while, I sort of have a sense of what will work live or not. And because the music's um, it's quite technical and there's a lot of arrangement that goes on. So I think it's a difficult style of metal to just jam out together in a room
Mm.
versus something that's a little bit more got a stripped back sounds. Like maybe if you're writing punk rock or something like that, it's easier to jam in the room. But when you're doing the complexity of the kind of arrangements we're doing, it's easier to be at home and do that. And then the songs will get assembled over time. Sometimes quickly, sometimes it might take a year for a song to come together once you find the right part for each section. And once there's sort of a bunch of songs, I might collate them, cut out the ones that I think aren't as good. And now that Corey's writing a few as well, we'll bring in his best stuff and like we hopefully it all works together. And so far it's been pretty cohesive, but that's generally how it works. And then when it comes to adding like vocals to it, um, usually the music's written first, then the vocals are added. But then they will be sort of programmed in as like cowbell hits or something like rhythmically first, and then we can add lyrics to it later on that fit in the compositional structure.
So it changes up every other time, I guess.
Yeah, it's usually like music first and then lyrics after. And
Mm.
then the lyrics have, instead of just trying to fit a bunch of text into the song, we have the exact amount of syllables usually that will fit in beforehand. And then that's the challenge with writing the lyrics, then, is having something that fits the vibe of the song, has the right amount of syllables to sound rhythmically good and all of that. So, uh, yeah, that's how we go about writing.
It is a rather technical process, and it's very particular in how everything's placed. Listening to the stuff that you guys up with, Kingdom of Ashes, the EP, the two albums, Nocturnal Gates and Carpathia, it seemed as though as I listened, each project seemed to have a theme sort of driving it. There was apocalypse, dystopia, there was afterlife, and supernatural creatures on the last one, which I absolutely enjoyed. Um, when you do plan these things out, do you often tackle it with a theme in mind straight away, or does it take a couple of songs to work out, oh, this is where it's sort of naturally going?
I mean, it depends as well on who's writing the lyrics, how we would go about it, and sometimes it might come from a more of a just personal thing, like someone's dreams or something like that, or sometimes the song might evoke a theme. So, like on Carpathia, there was that clear gothic sounds on a lot of the songs, which led us to writing about some like vampire, like supernatural
Mhm.
stuff. So, I think it just seems like will it fit with the music, and are we inspired to write lyrics in that style? And generally, there's no one theme for the whole album, but there might be like a bit of a vibe that we go by. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. Um, Also mentioning you're not only the guitarist of the band, but you also work with production. How do you approach crafting everything together? We've heard that it's very like separated. It's always music first and then lyrics sort of after. But how do you approach tackling the sound?
Yeah, well, I guess with the metal genre being, if you're producing an album, there's obviously some other elements apart from just performance, but that even comes down to who you choose to work with for mixing and mastering, and who you choose to have on the album. Like if you have session musicians, like structuring how you're going about the recording process. A lot of there's that side of it, which is sort of, I guess I'd call producing as well. So it's partly that. It's also some of the elements that you hear in the backgrounds, like some synthesizers or choirs. That stuff gets programmed in by myself, and if it's one of Corey's songs, he would do the same on his. And it's sort of just like having a trying to make sure the album has like a general cohesive artistic vision. So uh, that's the side of it that I would call the production. Um, and then when it comes to mixing and mastering, we have other people do that. So it might be different to say maybe bedroom producers in styles like pop might actually mix their own stuff as well, and they will call that the producing. So I guess it depends on your definition of the role of a producer. I mean, there's producers like Rick Rubin who they just come in and give ideas here and there, and like they don't actually mix anything or do much in terms of, as far as I'm aware, in terms of like writing or things like that. So, um, but that, yeah, what I said before is sort of how it works in our bands.
Yeah. Speaking of how that's constructed, with Carpathia, you guys worked with Hans Grossman and Wies and Centura, who are pretty prominent in the German metal scene. What was the experience like working with them? Because everything seems to be close knit together as it can be over there, but we're talking about people who are over off in Germany. So, was there any sort of complications? It seems like things came together quite well.
Honestly, it's easier even than working with people here sometimes because of the time zone difference. Like they can be working on things overnight for us, and then I'll wake up in the morning and have. So, for example, when Harness recorded the drum parts, he had like a rough. He had an idea of the sort of types of beats and things that would work with each section because we had sort of guide drums programmed. Then he would do his own thing, send through um, like a first draft of the drums, and usually it was all fine. And sometimes we'd maybe tweak a few sections, and so and because he was in Germany, it was like he could be working while I was sleeping, like I said. So it actually worked really efficiently in that way, and because he is an extremely like one of the top like best drummers in the genre, so obviously that made it easy to work with as well. So in that
Mhm.
case, we didn't have to worry about the recording production side of it because he has his own studio and he was able to record everything really well, do any editing required on his drums and stuff, which was probably
Mm.
like hardly any because he's so good. And yeah, so that was pretty simple. And then working with Victor or V Santura, he mixed our last two albums, and same thing. Yeah, very good process. Basically, you'd get the mixes come through normally in the morning, and then I would send them to the band and say, hey, if you've got any revisions about the mix, let me know. And then I would email him back, hopefully that evening, and then he would get started on it the next day. So yeah, that's how it worked and worked really well, especially because those two are very professional in what they do, and they also are playing bands together, so they know how each other works. I'm guessing so. Uh, it was a very smooth process on that album.
Which is really fantastic to hear because distance can be the bane of a lot of people's experiences. So the fact that it fitted together so well is really, really great to hear.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
those guys actually live in different cities in Germany as well. So a lot of bands these days, especially uh, in say you have a highly technical metal bands where you have you have to have a specific type of player that can enjoy and play that music. Sometimes they're not all located close by. Luckily, with our bands, we have everyone in the same city, but there's a lot of bands where the writing process is done online, giving each other ideas and stuff like that as well. And then it all comes together when bands can come together and rehearse, basically. So, uh, yeah, so it works pretty well.
yeah. As a genre as its own, heavy metal it definitely has a dark image, and detractors kind of pick apart and offer scaremonger to keep other music listeners away. What advice do you have for anyone interested in trying out listening to heavy metal for the first time? What artists, what albums should they check out to ease themselves into it? Because I only recently I've interacted with rock quite a bit, but I didn't actually start diving deeper into heavier metal type aspects until around 2020, around the pandemic. And even then, it only feels like a little bit of things there, like some poppy, some Bring the Horizon. Like, what things would you recommend?
I mean, it's tricky because you never know what people are going to resonate with, and sometimes you think, oh, I'll show someone some like lighter metal, and then they don't like it, but then they'll hear some kind of heavier metal and actually like it. So it can be tricky. But I would say that it can be if you base on like what's some of your favorite music now, there's probably a type of metal that either mixes with that genre, like maybe Bring Me the Horizon mixing pop and metal, or another angle could be if you're into pop music, power metal actually is, in my opinion, basically like pop slash musical theater put into like the metal context. It's got like clean singing. It's often quite happy sounding or uplifting, so it doesn't have the darker edge to it. So for some people, they might like power metal. If you're into stuff like pop punk or you come up through that sort of side of things, maybe metalcore or stuff like Bring the Horizon might be a good gateway. I think the last thing I was going to say was, yeah, for me, it was going from classic rock like, say, Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath. Then I eased into things like Metallica and Megadeth. I guess bands where the vocals aren't so extreme, because that's often like the big thing that stops a lot of people getting into metal. So initially, I didn't really like death metal or black metal vocals. But I guess it's an acquired taste, and eventually those vocals often fit the brutality or extremeness of the rest of the instruments. So um, I would just look for, there's so many styles of metal. So look for one that mixes what you already like with metal, perhaps. If it's the vocals that put you off, look for styles like power metal or traditional heavy metal that don't have the harsh vocals. And then eventually you might gradually get into heavier stuff or not, So,
Mm.
but I think that's probably the easiest way to go about it.
I think that that's absolutely brilliant. The music is so brilliant, is that there is a way in no matter what you listen to. There's always kind of like a path that goes into metal music. I learned something out of this today, so that's good. So power metal is for pop. So that's something now that I know,
Yeah,
which is absolutely brilliant.
yeah. I mean, some people might disagree with me on that, but basically, they power metal songs are usually catchy. Some would say a bit cheesy, but it depends. But like you'll have, yeah, sort of catchy chord progressions and vocals that are very singable, um, often operatic sounding vocals as well. And then in addition, you have often lots of flashy guitar solos, which are cool. And so it could be a good way to get people into metal that are used to focusing more on the singing side of things, I guess.
Absolutely. You guys have recently done a European tour, your first gigs, I think, outside of Australia. What was that experience like? What was the reception like over there?
Yeah, I mean, technically, our first show out of Australia was just before that. We did Hammer Sonic Festival in Indonesia, um, which was awesome. But that was our first ever tour overseas, was in Europe, and yeah, that was an awesome experience. Like it was the first time we toured uh, in a tour bus, and being able to go to bed in the bus every night after each show and wake up in the new city and play the new gigs. So that was a great experience for us. Yeah.
What was one of the best moments you had out on the road? Was there anything that really stuck out to you?
Um, well, some of the favorite shows stick out a lot. Like actually, the one in Indonesia, Hammer Sonic, was probably my favorite on stage memory, just because it was such a massive crowd and we were first time in a new country, and the energy from that crowd was awesome. And when it came to Europe, honestly, it's such a blur because we played so many shows and there was so many cool things. But I would just say the ability to be totally immersed in living on a bus and being on the road and exploring different cities when we could was just all like a giant epic experience. So um, yeah, like it's very hard to pick one thing.
Mm. Yeah, speaking of the tour atmosphere being on the bus, you guys have been on touring with a lot of iconic metal bands. You've got Ginger, Soilwork, Thy Art is Murder, and Flesh God Apocalypse are some of the ones that I picked up. What was the experience like working with other metal bands? Is it always sort of cohesive?
Well, yeah, it in terms of like touring versus having like just a single opening slot, we played a few shows. Like we did a Aussie tour where we opened for Flesh God Apocalypse like 5 years ago or so, and they were really nice guys. And then the big tour one was the Europe one where we were opening for Nail of Ascaris, And living on the bus with those guys and the other band Walkways for a month was awesome because everyone was just super nice and we all got along really well. And it was great watching other bands play every night and seeing, them put on awesome shows. And obviously you learn things from watching like that. And then for the ones, a lot of the other ones you mentioned would be like single support acts. So we might only briefly say hello to the bands and stuff like that. So, but yeah, generally, it's always been like a great experience. Yeah.
Mm. Um, with all the harmony and the connection, there's obviously a lot of support there. What's the best sort of advice that someone in the industry has given you guys?
We haven't really been given much advice, to be honest, but one that would stick out to me, which is a simple one, I think it was Sarkis from Rotting Christ who said this. He just said, keep going and don't stop, So, um, and that's what we've done so far. So, and we'll keep doing that as long as we want to. And I think that's like probably a good piece of advice because there's a lot of obstacles as a band that come along and challenges and a lot of effort that needs to be put in. And sometimes without seeing much reward, if you're thinking of the reward as like, having like you're not going to have a massive fan base overnight and you're going to have to grind out lots of shows and things like that when you're starting out normally, unless you hit it really lucky straight away. So just having that perseverance is probably, yeah, the best advice we've been given.
Absolutely. You guys have done that since the beginning, and you've pretty much made it over a decade later. Kingdom of Ashes came out in 2015, and now you guys are in 2025.
Yeah, it's been happening for a while. And I guess because it started when it was pretty young at that point. I think things really started coming together in sort of 2018, 19, and whereas other bands might get a bit of a quicker start, but because at the start, like I was like 17, 18, it's going to take some time to get things rolling. So it might be quicker for other bands. And yeah, in terms of making it as a band, I don't think there's ever a point where bands are like, yes, I've made it. I think once we got over to Europe and were able to achieve that kind of dream and the awesome tours we've done around Australia with bands, like some people would call that making it, and to me it is. But we're also a small band still, and there's a long way to go. So
Absolutely. It's
yeah,
a good
that'd be my
signal
thoughts on
that,
that one.
yeah, it's a good signal that you don't think like you're high and mighty and like above people or that you've like completely made it, but it's a sign that you're on the right path. I think that's a really good way of looking at it.
Yeah, I think being able to play our music to great crowds and um, have it even just breaking even on awesome experiences is great. Like you don't have to be doing it full time, but I think maybe once a band can tour full time and that's their job, that would be the big making it. But like be, being able to have all these awesome experiences in general is great, and it's about playing the music first and foremost over other things like how much money you're making and um, how many social media like or how many streams you have and things like that. It's about those real life experiences you have with people, I think, that really count.
Absolutely. The last question I've got to ask you, just one last question. What does 2025 look like for Freedom of Fear? Will we be getting any new music, any live show? What's on the agenda?
Well, coming up very soon, we're opening for Death Clock around Australia. So
Mhm.
for those not aware of Death Clock, it's a fictional band really from a cartoon called Metalocalypse that was on Adult Swim, I think like 10 or 15 years ago. It was quite a popular show, and that has then sort of because the music was cool from the show, they've turned it into a live act with an awesome band, including Gene Hoglan on drums, who's legendary. So
Mhm.
we're going to be playing around some awesome theaters around Australia at the start of April, opening for them. And we might have another tour. We'll see what happens. But at the moment, we're very busy trying to finish recording our next album as well, which I
Ooh.
doubt would come out this year, but you never know. It might be next year.
Mm.
So yeah, it's very hard to tell. There's a lot of things behind the scenes that need to fall into place before you know when music's coming out sometimes. So um, yeah, basically that's what we've got happening at the moment.
Absolutely. It's a really good environment. I remember listening to you guys, Apple Music. I think there's a recording of you guys at the Adelaide Music Festival where you're doing like a full guitar solo that you just get completely lost in it. You wouldn't know that it was a live performance until you get to the last 10 seconds and you hear the crowd cheering. So that has got to be really good for you guys to be back out on the road, back down in Australia as well, and bringing it to so many states around here.
Yeah, that one at Adelaide Guitar Festival was pretty fun. That was a unique kind of show where we were actually the first metal band to ever be invited to play that festival because normally it's more, you know, widely accepted genres that play that. So it was great that we got the opportunity. And that was a cover song we did by legendary guitarists Jason Becker and Marty Friedman. And so that was a real challenge, that one. We had to practice a lot to pull that one off live. And I was pretty happy how that one turned out. It's probably my favorite live recording we've had. And actually, we had V Santura mix that one as well. So it has that like studio quality mix as well.
That explains that. Um, well, Matt, I just want to say thank you so much for chatting with me today. I really hope you guys enjoy the tour, enjoy continuing to make music, and I hope a lot of people from this come out and see you guys. It looks like a really good show. It looks like it's going to be really good.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Thanks for checking out all the music and coming up with all those questions. And it was a nice interview. So, yeah, thank you.
Thanks.